have no idea how dangerous you are.
This is chaos magic, Wanda. But that makes you the Scarlet Witch.
Hey guys, it's Chris and welcome back to another WandaVision video, episode 8. She finally got her made-up name. So we learned a little bit more about the Scarlet Witch, Wanda Maximoff. We actually got essentially an origin story here, a complete origin story, except for the whole parentage thing, which we'll talk about here in a few minutes. But we learned the main idea behind this is that she is a rare form of witch that can control something called chaos magic. Now this is directly from the comics, of course. So chaos magic is, I guess, why she has the red magic as far as the way they're displaying it visually. And then Agatha Harkness has the purple magic or whatever. And then Doctor Strange kind of does the green thing. He pulls from other realms for that energy and all that kind of stuff. But chaos magic is essentially a magic so powerful that it was thought to be non-existent even by the Sorcerer Supreme himself, Doctor Strange, and previous Sorceress Supremes, etc. This magic can essentially manipulate, warp, and reconstruct the very fabric of existence and reality to the user's whims, or potentially bring about the total destruction of the cosmos. So essentially in this episode, we got a trip through time back in Wanda's past as far as what's really going on, how the Hex was created in the first place, as Agatha walks her through her life essentially while holding her twins hostage. So what's really cool is we learned that she had some magic on some level, essentially being a mutant herself with this X gene. So what we actually learned is that she stopped the Stark bomb from going off when her and Pietro were the only ones left alive after the bombing of her home. So essentially her base power is manipulating probability, or in other words, luck. But in the MCU, her powers were fully unlocked by the Mind Stone, of course, as we saw in this episode. So even back in the day when she was being experimented on by Hydra with the staff that Loki had, which of course housed the Mind Stone itself, she even subconsciously cut that out from the people who were studying her when they didn't see what actually happened as far as her being able to unlock the casing and see the Mind Stone itself. So having this direct experience with an Infinity Stone actually leveled Wanda up, essentially making her a goddess, and she just doesn't know it yet. However, in the comic lore, which of course they're not sticking to directly, but they do follow the main beats of this, her powers were enhanced by a being known as the Elder God, whose name is Chthon, who is known as the god of chaos magic. And again, this is something that nobody believed existed, including Doctor Strange himself. So Chthon, I believe I'm pronouncing that correctly. I've never really known, is it Chthon or is it Chthon? Either way, is the elder god and archdemon of chaos and ruler of his own realm. And what's really cool about this, as far as a backstory and lore that can fit into the bigger MCU, is that he is actually responsible for the creation of many dark supernatural forces on Earth, such as witches, werewolves, and vampires, which includes Blade indirectly. Obviously, because he created the first vampire, vampires were now a thing. That eventually leads to Blade. And of course, we do have a Blade movie upcoming, which I'm not 100% sure if that's in the MCU directly. We also have Morbius. So you can see all these things are kind of related back to the Scarlet Witch and her story as far as this elder god Chthon and his chaos magic and what he did to Earth back in the day when he was still around. So essentially in the comics, Chthon was banished from the material universe. This would happen in a time in the comics when the Earth's mages got together, basically with a spell, which was essentially a lie, as it said, when they said simply, there is no god of chaos, there is no chaos magic. So they used this to kind of banish him because he was too powerful to actually destroy, but he's always searched for a way to return to the material universe. So essentially everything he does is in preparation for his return, but to do that he would require a powerful vessel which would allow him to return to Earth, like perhaps someone like a Scarlet Witch, who, like I said before, everyone thought did not exist. Another thing that kind of points in the direction of Chthon being kind of the big bad in the background, whether we ever see him or not is another question. I think that would be more of a Doctor Strange 2 type of thing. But we did see the Darkhold in the last episode. Everybody assumes this is the Darkhold. Remember, the Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. is not canon, so the one shown there does not count. But we did see this, and it was also likely the one that was missing from the shelves of Doctor Strange. And as far as the Darkhold itself, guess who wrote it? That's right, Chthon. So it looks like the way this episode went with this origin story essentially, and the way it kind of fits in the MCU as opposed to the comics, it looks like we may be headed for him as the big bad in Doctor Strange. Of course, it could still be Nightmare or somebody like that. Or they could do, again, some kind of amalgamation of different characters. So if he is, in fact, the big bad in the background as far as the Darkhold, this book he wrote himself, it may likely include a spell or a hex on how to summon him back to reality. And this could be likely setting up, again, Doctor Strange 2, and possibly even a little bit of Spider-Man 3, since it is going to deal with the multiverse. As far as the episode itself, we learned that Wanda never actually took Vision's body. She went there, and it looked like, she kind of busted into place and wanted to steal it. But in fact, she comes up and says, I can't feel you anymore, which of course was their thing. She realized he was dead. That might have essentially given her some closure until she found that Vision had bought a piece of property, because of course they did confirm that she watched all these sitcoms and Vision knew this. We saw this in the one scene where they go back to the Avengers compound during the time of Captain America's Civil War and the Sokovia Accords. So after they fell in love and all this kind of stuff, at some point he had went and bought this piece of property, and that's when she drives out to Westview, where he had actually bought this property. We see her driving through town. We see some of the characters there in the real world, and of course it's still being hit by the blip or whatever, which affected the whole planet. Well, technically the whole universe, or at least half of it. And of course she loses her shit and altered reality with the chaos magic and recreated him, which is why he has no memories of before this moment. Now, of course, we got the big reveal, too, that Hayward used the corpse to create the White Vision, the big reveal at the end of this story, although this is going to be pretty devastating for Wanda to see him alive, but this is also a comic thing as well, so this will be a sore spot for her, because I assume, just like the comics, he will have no memory of her or having children or any of that stuff, which could be kind of like her seeing a literal ghost in some way. So this whole White Vision thing is not going to be good for her mental health either. We also see in this episode Agatha's backstory as well, Agatha Harkness being a witch from Salem, although she is much older than that. I believe she's over like 10,000 years old, but she summons her energy, being the purple energy, from the Dark Universe, which they've touched on before in the Marvel Universe. And we see her actually take the brooch from her mother, so we've been seeing that brooch the whole entire time, which of course gave us a clue that she was Agatha Harkness in the first place from the very first episode. But now we see how she acquired that brooch. Her mother and her coven tried to kill her for overusing her powers or whatever, being above her station, as they called it. And they tried to kill her, but it backfired because she was so powerful. And essentially, we come up to the modern day, and she just wants to know how in the hell Wanda was able to do all this stuff, because she could see she is much more powerful than her. So she knew of the chaos magic, but again, like everybody else, she thought it was just a myth, and it never really existed in the first place. As I mentioned, we did confirm that Wanda did indeed watch a lot of sitcoms. We saw this in a couple different facets of her life as they went through time there, taking a little trip down memory lane, so to speak. We do see that her parents are killed, but again, in the comics, these are only her adoptive parents, not to mean that they're not actually her parents. I mean, they're the ones who loved her and raised her. But of course, her real dad is Magneto. Now, this is the only thing missing from this episode as far as a origin story for the Scarlet Witch. Will they kind of figure out how to do this in the MCU? So essentially this whole episode was an origin story, which is kind of weird since we've seen her in several movies already, and they just called her Wanda. She's already part of the Avengers and everything, but she didn't have her quote-unquote made-up name like Peter Parker said. But essentially, to cap this off, she would have been just kind of a normal witch, but the Mind Stone in the MCU unlocked her X gene, made her more powerful, almost a goddess, as I said before. But again, in the comics, this was the elder god Chthon. So will we see the completion of her origin story as far as her real father? How could Magneto be her father in the MCU if she existed here first? Well, of course, they did pull Pietro over, and I think now, as I said in the last video, in the live stream last Sunday, I do think Pietro is now actually the Pietro the Quicksilver from the Fox universe, because we're dealing with all this multiverse stuff. So I think they can kind of figure out a way to work this out to make Magneto her father, because I do think they'll stick with that large beat from the comics. Because remember, time may not work like we think in the upcoming multiverse of madness. Madness. Anyway, guys, let me know what you think in the comments below. As usual, thank you for all the support, especially you guys on Patreon. And a huge shout out to my executive Patreon SmokeScreen producers. And of course, if you dig what I do here, please give these videos a like, comment, and a share. And of course, hit that subscribe button so you won't miss anything as we try to save this channel from the chaos magic known as the YouTube algorithm. And as usual, thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.